Okay, my friends, welcome once again to the next episode here of the Red Delta Project podcast, live feed Q&A. We're teaching the whole world to get stronger with the power of calisthenics training and helping you escape from the diet and exercise rat race. My name is Matt Shipley. As always, today is another one of my favorite episodes. These are my Ask Me Anything episodes. I've been talking at length over the past several weeks about fundamental approaches for building muscle. What is the fundamental stimulus that we're trying to create? And so I wanted to open the floor to you today to help any misunderstandings that may be out there. Ask me anything about what I've been covering over the past couple of weeks about basically creating the stimulus for hypertrophy through burning out the muscles by focusing on work capacity, if you will, challenging the muscular work capacity. How much tension is in the muscle? How long can the tension be there for? Working on essentially stamina and your ability to keep pushing yourself. And in last week's episode, I covered both some of my favorite ways to make that happen, different workout programs, things like 5x5 straight sets, being able to burn out the muscle in short periods of time, like micro workouts, 3-minute tests, things like that, or longer things like compounding drop sets and so on. Because ultimately, remember that when it comes to creating a stimulus for hypertrophy with calisthenics, it's really no different than doing it with weights. You're just kind of using a different method for adjusting the resistance on how to generate a little bit more tension in the muscle. That's basically the only difference. So whatever you did in the gym for building muscle with weights, you just basically do the same thing with calisthenics. And so now we're looking at any sort of questions and challenges that may not have been addressed, because ultimately I don't know all the answers, of course. That is why it is called the Red Delta Project. It's not something that is always so static and dogmatic. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the knowledge that you need. And ultimately, remember that this whole fitness thing is a human endeavor, not just a physical endeavor. We can know everything there is to understand about the science about how the body changes and builds muscle or loses weight and adapts to the stimulus that we create with it. We could do all that stuff all day long, but ultimately success in fitness as in life boils down to how do you apply it that's in the best way for you? Because that's really what matters most. It's not about what is the best workout program, what is the best diet, what is the optimal way to do anything. It's really much more a question of, well, what is the best way for you to do these things and for you to apply it? And that's the thing that's really important. And that's why I open up the floor to you, my friends, because ultimately, this episode that I have once every 6 weeks or so is about me addressing your concerns. I'm doing this for you. I do this because I love talking with you and being able to converse with you. So that's why I also like doing this. This episode or these podcasts that I do every week, roughly around 2:30 Mountain Standard Time here in Denver on Saturdays, is like the highlight of my whole week. This is the fastest hour of my week. It just goes by like that because I love doing this. So let's open up the channel here. Esley's coming on right away saying, "Hey Matt, a lot of articles say to build strength, you need to train at like 3 to 5 repetitions close to your max." Yep. I trained years with this approach and consistently pushed myself, but didn't get results from it. Well, I would ask a little bit more for what kind of results? What are you looking for? I'm assuming strength, which is just another way of saying how much tension are you getting in the muscle? Because that's ultimately what strength is theoretically a measure of how much tension you're generating. But there's a lot more to being able to generate a lot of tension in the muscle than just your rep range. The rep range is just kind of a general guideline approach for how heavy you should be selecting for your resistance. But there's a lot more to it, particularly as I discussed in many cases, muscle engagement, tension control. You can only work a muscle, aka get the tension to a high degree in the muscle, if you can get tension to it in the first place. So, for example, if you're doing dips or bench press, for example, and you're going really heavy, but you barely feel anything in the chest, that means there's not really that much tension in the chest because your brain has trouble putting it there. And it doesn't matter how heavy you go. It doesn't matter what range you're using. If your brain is having trouble getting tension in the muscle in the first place, you're never going to be able to develop much strength. And remember that you can feel tension, right? If I tense my chest up, as I'm doing now, I can feel my chest contract because there's enough tension there to creating a feedback loop. My brain is sending the signal through the nervous system to engage the motor units and engaging my chest musculature, my fibers in my chest. And in turn, that's sending a signal back to my brain saying, yes, it's on. You feel this sort of thing. So that's the first place I would look is your tension control dialed in? The second thing I would suggest is, how do you know that's really as heavy enough that you should be going for? Because a lot of times we have a very poor ability to adequately estimate what we're really doing in the gym, how hard we're pushing. There was a great article over at strongerbyscience.com several months ago. And basically, they did a meta-analysis, and the consensus was people aren't pushing nearly as hard as they think they are. And so you may be thinking, I'm going 3 to 5, but maybe it's closer to 8 or 10. I do this all the time where someone will come to me and they'll be like, I always save a rep in the tank. I'm always saving a rep in the tank. I'll do like 8 pull-ups and save a couple reps in the tank. And then sometime I might be like, okay, I want to see how many pull-ups you can give me in a minute or something. And they'll bang out like 18 reps right off the on the first try, uninterrupted. I'm like, you think you're saving a rep in the tank. You're actually saving 9 reps in the tank. So it could be a case that it's just not heavy enough. And then the third thing I would look at is, are you still focusing on a progressive approach though? Because remember, it doesn't matter how great your program is. I don't care how your reps are. I don't care if your technique is better or dialed in. I don't care if everything is optimal and perfect or whatever. You get results through progression, my friends, not whether or not you're adhering to a formula. So if you're doing 3 to 5 reps with, say, a weighted pull-up, 30-pound weight vest, and 6 months later, you're still doing 3 to 5 reps of pull-ups with a 30-pound weight vest, of course you're not going to get any stronger from that because you're still doing exactly the same thing. So you have to have progression in order to get a result from any sort of program in any type of method. It's not because you do the right rep range, you do the right number of sets and the right programming and all that sort of thing. Results come from progression of the program that you're using. And that's what you want to focus on. The 3 to 5 rep range is just basically saying you got to train heavy. You got to use a lot of resistance, because when you have a lot of resistance, that necessitates a high degree of tension in the muscles, which is fundamentally what strength is. That's all it is. 3 to 5 reps doesn't do you anything. It doesn't do you anything as far as getting results, nor does any other rep range, because you get the results from the progression of what you're doing. So you may need to stray from that a little bit. You may need to practice a little bit more and just keep the resistance that you have till you're getting 6 or 8 repetitions. Then you can add more weight to it. Or you may need to even go a little heavier and you're getting doubles and triples and so on. So there's a few other nuances to it. You don't get results just by training the right rep range or having the right numbers. Vic Sheldon coming on saying, I need to be on a relatively low protein diet due to a kidney problem. Yep. How can I best gain muscle while restricting protein? Well, first and foremost, whenever you have any sort of condition that requires some particular addressing of diet and stuff like that, always, always, always consult with the dietitians or the doctors or the healthcare managers who are managing your condition. This is the realm of registered dietitian stuff. I just spent literally all last weekend getting my ACE continuing education credits and becoming a nutrition specialist. And literally like the entire course was, don't go outside your scope of practice, which means unless you're a registered dietitian, you can't tell someone exactly how they should be eating. You can work with general guidelines. You instead refer out to the actual experts like dietitians who can help that. So that's the first place that I would go for you. Second is look at different eating strategies that may behoove you. Like, what if you spread out the protein a little bit more throughout the day? Would that allow you to get a little bit more quantity of protein to it? And if you are able to do that, what's the amount that you can have roughly at each meal? Would it make more sense to get different protein sources involved? So if your body, for example, could somehow digest it or utilize it better according to your condition, if it was plant-based proteins. I'm just guessing. I'm just literally throwing things out into the ether. I really have no idea. But the last thing is, don't necessarily worry too much about it. Is that a lot of times we're getting some degree of protein. And if you're not quite getting enough protein, what you're probably mostly going to do is not so much inhibit your muscle growth, it's just inhibiting maybe the speed of the muscle growth. So instead of building a few pounds of muscle a month, you're going to maybe cut it in half. Because the primary driver for building muscle is the exercise that you do. Yes, if you don't eat enough and you don't have enough protein and calories as a whole, that's going to make it more difficult. Absolutely. But those things by and of themselves do not make muscle grow. Muscle grows because we are subjecting it to a mechanical challenge and progressive resistance. That's why it grows. So make sure that you can get some degree of protein. And if you are, it's probably not going to make that much difference unless it needs to be super, super low. And the last thing I would say is there a way that you can just fix the issue? A lot of times when people come to me and they're like, I got this wrist issue, I've got this metabolic thing, I've got this going on, that going on. Lots of times folks are saying, how do I still get successful with this physiological handicap? And the bottom line is you just don't. It's always going to hold you back to some degree. So the real best thing that you can do is it possible to just get it fixed, to get it solved, to get it done? If it needs to heal, if it's a process that you need to go through of getting your body to a better place so you no longer have the condition, do whatever that is. Make that your top priority. If it's not something that's going to be chronic and something you can't fix, then yeah, work as best you can with it. And that way it's going to be something that you can manage and still make progress with it. Master Dave coming on saying, Matt, I gained a bit of muscle, but my reps aren't getting any higher and my progression more advanced. Following up on before, I mostly focus on technical advancement. Sometimes I might regress the exercise. Yeah, fine. So we're talking about building some muscle, different thing from strength to some degree. Reps aren't getting any higher or my progression's more advanced. So when you're working in such a low rep range like that, keep in mind it's kind of like a percentage thing, right? Sometimes when I have people who are just getting into pull-up training and they get like 3 pull-ups and they can do 3 pull-ups, it could be weeks and weeks and weeks until they get 4 pull-ups. Because when you go from 3 to 4, that's, my math is always terrible, but that's like 30% more volume in a set than if you were doing like 20 reps to 21 reps. So when you're working at numbers that are that low, getting a single rep is a massive step forward. Massive step forward. And that's why I think you're smart to be focusing on the technical side of things. A lot of times when you're focusing on strength, it's less about the reps and more about the resistance. And keep in mind that resistance is a lot more than just the weight that you're lifting. So range of motion is usually where I would tell people to focus, because the resistance on a muscle changes through the range of motion. So if you're doing, for example, squats, and you're not quite getting down very low, then yeah, keep the weight the same, keep the reps the same, focus on getting more range, kind of like how powerlifters will do with box squats or the board bench press and stuff. And that's how you can make progress. So this brings up another thing that oftentimes happens when people will say, I'm not making progress, I'm not making progress. The fact of the matter is you actually are making progress. You're just not making progress in the ways that you're measuring it. It happens all the time with weight loss. People are like, I'm not making progress. I'm not making progress. My diet isn't working. My workout isn't working. Everything's a complete waste of time. And I'll go through and I'll just be picking their brain. I'm like, let me get this straight. Your energy level is up. Your pants are looser. Your dress size is down. You look a lot better in the mirror. People are commenting that you look a lot leaner. Your performance in the gym is up. Like all these things are great. And they're like, yeah, but the number on the scale isn't changing. Bloody flipping da, who cares, right? If you're making progress 8 different ways in getting bits in all these different areas, then who cares if one thing is not improving? Let me put it to you this way. Would you rather like never build muscle, never get stronger, never have any improvement whatsoever, but you get more reps? What would you rather have? Measurement in the one thing you're taking a look at, or improvement in everything but the one thing you're looking at? Well, I sure as heck would rather have improvement in many different areas and fall short in the one thing I'm trying to measure. Because a lot of times our actual result that we're looking for in our workouts is actually kind of measured by many different things. But when we're using one metric to track our progress and see if we're making progress, you're usually blind to the actual progress you're trying to make. And so you're kind of fooling yourself into thinking that you're not making progress when you actually are. Mohammed is coming on saying, if my goal is only hypertrophy between chest to wall and back to wall handstands push-up, which one do you recommend? Which one? What? Let me see what if I missed anything. Come on back with a little more information there, Mohammed. Aladdin saying, hello, everyone. Greetings. Thank you, Matt, for being here for us. Helped me a lot. Any tips on doing push-ups with long arms? Yep, same thing as anything else. So you get this a lot in calisthenics, and maybe it's in the weightlifting facilities and or cultures and things like that, but you typically don't hear this a whole lot in other areas where people are like, oh, I've got long limbs, this doesn't work very well. This is one of the things I love about calisthenics, though, is that it is your body working with your body, whatever conditions your body has, long limbs, short limbs, all these sorts of things. So do your push-ups, do them the same way as anyone else. I wouldn't recommend any technical differences. I wouldn't recommend any changes in programming or anything. Everything's just the same. And you could say, well, my longer limbs are going to make it harder for me to achieve a one-arm push-up or whatever. So what? Who cares? Yeah, maybe you're not quite built to be a calisthenics athlete if you wanted to be competitive or something of that nature. But outside of that, if your general goal is usually just muscle and strength and health and fitness and stuff, so what? So it's harder to do a certain exercise. So it's easier to do other ones. That doesn't matter. What does matter is, are you able to progressively challenge your musculature for addressing the fundamental objective that relates to your goal? And it may be easier to do it, it may be harder, but at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing. So I wouldn't give you any different recommendations if you've got longer limbs. And don't let it get between your ears too. You'll hear guys all the time, they're making excuses. Oh, I got long limbs, so I can't squat very deep. I've got short limbs, so I can't do this. I've got this kind of body, so I can't do that. Usually that's just making an excuse for a shortcoming that they have or a weakness that they have that they're not willing to actually fix or address. Not saying that's your case, but a lot of times you hear those rhetoric saying, oh, if I've got long limbs, I can't do calisthenics. BS, total BS. Alan Lost in Canada, good to see you again. Matt, do you train clients in calisthenics only, or do you also treat barbell, dumbbells, kettlebells? It's primarily calisthenics, of course, because my main, I've got many different irons in the fire through Red Delta Project, but my main gym that I train at is a calisthenics gym. We don't have any weights there or anything. We don't even have dip belts and stuff. We've got the stuff to do calisthenics because it's a specialty gym. So that is primarily calisthenics, absolutely, because that's literally the only thing we can do there. There's another gym in town here in Denver that I literally train only 2 clients at because they just want to do other things. And we'll play around with dumbbells, kettlebells. I don't do a whole lot of barbell work. I find that a lot of people, it's a lot easier and more efficient for most people to get what they want from hand weights than barbell weights. It also makes it a lot easier to train individuals in a crowded gym. I used to train at one of the biggest gyms here in Denver, the Colorado Athletic Club at the Tabor Center. And we had, at the time that I was there, literally 2 squat racks for the entire gym. And there were 1,000 people coming through that gym every day. So some guys would live and die by the barbell. And I, of course, have more of a fundamental approach. I'll just use anything. It doesn't really matter to me. So they would have a client literally spend half the session waiting for a squat rack to open up, and they would just be talking, or they'd be stretching, and they'd be doing not much of anything, and they'd finally get on the squat rack because it was limited equipment for a lot of people. And so that's another reason I don't do a whole lot of barbell work. It's like being able to reliably get on a squat rack or a bench press is just hard in a crowded gym. And usually people want to train when it's most popular too, like 5:30 at night. So I'll do a lot of hand weights and things like that for folks who are interested in that, just because it gives us a lot more flexibility. But calisthenics is kind of the bread and butter that I work with, because that's what I can be most effective with. What other questions can we do here? Aldin saying, Excuse me, back again. Do. Mohammed saying, I mean, which targets the delts better? Okay, very good for that. Basically, don't think any type of pressing, overhead pressing, delts. Okay, let me back up a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anything with the upper body should be considered a delt exercise. Okay, you should be working your delts very strong with everything in your upper body. If your arms are moving or working, your shoulders better damn well be working. Okay, bicep curls, tricep extensions. And remember, this is not a passive approach. Don't make the engagement and utilization of your muscles passive, because that's usually what most people do, which is why most people usually have haphazard hit or miss approaches with their training. Exercises don't work muscles. You do. You engage the muscles to do the exercise. The exercise is only the application. That's all it is. And the resistance of the exercise is necessitating how much tension is in there. So that's all the exercise does. The exercise does not make your muscles work. You tell the muscle to work for the exercise. Don't put the cart before the horse. So for getting your shoulders to work, everything with the upper body had damn well better be a shoulder exercise. You should be doing push-ups and dips and pull-ups and rows and rear flies and everything and saying, yes, that did work my shoulders to at least some degree. Now, yes, of course, overhead pressing, handstand, push-up kind of stuff is going to be a little more emphasis on the shoulders, which is very good, especially if you want to build your shoulders up. But basically anything overhead pressing should work the entire thing. And you should be using the entire deltoid complex, if you want to call it that, for everything that you're doing. Remember, this is chain training method, which is a video I'm going to be coming out with to explain it in more detail this week. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and stuff, because when you understand things on a fundamental level from chain training, you recognize that the entirety of the muscles should be working a lot more for more exercises. Because when it comes to building up a muscle, one of the most effective ways to do that, to make it bigger or stronger, isn't to use it more in one exercise. It's to use it a hell of a lot more all the time. And that time after time for myself and other people I've trained, and they're like, my chest is finally getting better. My back is getting bigger. My shoulders, my glutes, my abs, all this stuff is getting bigger. They're not doing anything special. They don't have a new exercise. They're just recognizing, they're like, I can get my muscle to work better. And now I'm using it a lot more all the time. I'm using it more in push-ups and plank and when I'm carrying groceries and farmer's carries. That's the real litmus test. And that's why I'm saying make everything you're doing about your shoulders, because that's going to be far more effective than dialing in one specific exercise to go optimize it or get it to be as good as possible. Dan, coming on. I know the two crucial elements for growth, time and tension. Yep. But would a 5x8 iso hold equal 2x20, since the load would be different, both 40 seconds? Yeah. So if the load is different, then theoretically the amount of tension is different. So you're changing one of those variables there. If you can change the amount of the time is the same, but the load is different, then you are changing still the amount of work capacity of the muscle for being able to do that sort of thing. Magia is saying weed for gains, yes or no? Here's the thing we want to always keep in mind, folks, because I'm not a smoker or I don't do edibles or anything like that, but Denver here, that's a really big part of our culture here. For the most part, it probably isn't going to matter. Because ultimately everything, it's like, does this help me build muscle? Does that help me build muscle? Does this help? Does that hurt? All these, here's the bottom line you always want to think about. Does it improve my workouts or recovery? If it can improve your training and your recovery, it's going to help. I don't care what it is. You could come to me and say, what if I stood on my head and sang Whistling Dixie while juggling a kettlebell with my feet? Like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, do whatever you want. But if it can improve either your ability to challenge your muscular work capacity or speed up your recovery, then it helps. If it doesn't do anything, which very well may not, then no, it won't do anything. That's what it does, is it influences, or it influences negatively. And it's probably going to be different for everybody. And remember, a lot of times when we come into these questions in our fitness culture, of does it help or does it hurt, 9 times out of 10, if it's not obvious, it probably doesn't matter. And if it does matter, you're probably going to understand it personally for you by trial and error. So you could say, what if I did some edibles after working out to recover and kind of just come back down? I don't know, give it a shot. You could come away and say, oh man, I've had guys come away from doing the stupidest little thing imaginable. There was a guy one time at a gym. This was way back when Atkins was big and everything was low carb. And he's like, I don't know why, but I started eating these sport jelly beans. Basically, they're just regular jelly beans with some smidgen of electrolytes in them. It's like, I eat these jelly beans before I work out. My workouts are so much better. And his trainer was like ripping him a new one because he's like, the sugar in that, the carbohydrate, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't matter. If you do something and you're like, holy smokes, that made such a difference. It's so much better now. It doesn't matter if slamming your hand in the door is what you were trying out. If you did something and you're like, I don't know why, but my workouts are so much better now, it's better. Flat out, done, end of discussion. But if you do something that everybody's like, it's the greatest thing, it's awesome, it's wonderful, it's the best thing ever, and you're like, I did it, and it didn't really seem to help. Or worse, it was like, oh, I felt like crap during the whole workout, then it's going to hurt you. So go off of the experience if you're not sure. And unless it's an obvious thing, then it's probably either not going to really matter or it's going to be something that you need to figure it out through trial and error. And again, it should be a very obvious answer too. If you come away from a week or two of trying something, you're like, I'm not really sure. It probably doesn't really matter very much. Jalen coming on saying, what is the most effective non-pulling back exercise? Well, back is pulling. It is, that's what you're going to do. If you're not pulling, you're not working your back. But things that aren't necessarily pulling specific, let's explore those. For example, like push-ups and dips. Those have a pulling component to it for stability, but those are pretty good. Dips are pretty good. L-sits are pretty good for the back as well, especially if you're pushing your hips forward with your lats because you're getting shoulder extension, which is pulling, fundamentally. Back bridges are, of course, any type of bridge that you're doing is going to be working your back. Ab wheel is also another one. Of course, you're pulling the wheel underneath you. So yeah, it's kind of like saying what's a non water-based way to hydrate. Like if it doesn't have water, it's not hydrating. If it's not pulling, it's not involving the back musculature. But I think I get what you're saying is what can I do to work my back without actually like pulling my hands closer to you? In which case I would say go with the ab wheel or similar type exercise and bridge training would be good. And then any type of pushing movement that utilizes back stability, which is almost all of them, handstands, push-ups, dips are another example, are also good ways of going about that. Lorenzo, it's good to see you. Hello, Matt. I warm up during doing a full body mobility exercises before my overcoming isometric workout. Good combination. Do you recommend doing my overcoming isometric exercises with less intensity as a warm up instead? I would do a little bit of both if I were you. So the mobility stuff is a really good complement to the isometrics because the isometrics does have a lot of carryover to mobility because being able to generate muscle tension and strength is heavily influencing your mobility. But at the end of the day, we still want that movement through big ranges of motion to kind of apply that mobility, if you will. But when we are getting into isometrics or any strength training for that generalization, you have this ramp up that your nervous system needs to go through. Remember, with a good warm up, we want to effectively prepare our bodies for the physiological demand that's about to come. And a lot of times that means subjecting it to a lighter demand of what you're going to do. So you can run on a treadmill and do jumping jacks until you're hot and sweaty, but that doesn't do almost anything to prepare you for weighted pull-ups because you're going to jump on that pull-up bar and your nervous system is going to go, dude, what the hell is this? Back in the day, I used to ride my bike to Taekwondo. And so I would ride my bike. It'd take me like 20, 30 minutes to get there. And as soon as I'd start getting into class, my body was still totally cold and unprepared for Taekwondo. It's like, dude, you just warmed me up for bike riding and now you're doing this other thing. I'm not ready for this. But then I would get into class and I would stretch out and I would do everything for Taekwondo. And then afterwards, I would get on my bike to ride home, and my legs would be like, we're not ready for riding a bike. What are you doing? Like, and I would be cold for that. So it's always specific. So for that reason, I always recommend with isometrics, start with a set or two, or technically it's a rep in isometrics, of applying like 70, 80% intensity to ramp up your nervous system, your ability to generate a lot of tension and being able to ramp it up, if you will, okay, and get your nervous system to go into a higher mode of demanding more tension in the muscle, including more motor units, control, coordination. You know, if you're doing an isometric deadlift, for example, and you have trouble engaging your hamstrings for it, you could have a set or two going like, okay, I'm really trying to engage my hamstrings. All right, yeah, there they are, and do that for a set or two. So I would do a little bit of both. And if you're really dialing it in, it shouldn't take that much time or that much energy away from things, because it should be fairly gentle as well. Narcissus, it's good to see you. How are you doing? I'm doing good, my friend. Thanks. What do you think of deep stop rows? Many people claim it's a good way to build big traps. Thank you so much for the advice. So I'm a big fan of big range of motion in general. And for the most part, more range produces more benefit. So big range of motion is good. Whenever we're stopping things, we're also killing, to a degree, things like momentum as well. So it's like a deadlift. You're coming from a dead start with things. And yeah, that makes the exercise a lot harder. But the question we always have to ask is it harder in a productive way? Just because doing an exercise a certain way is more difficult doesn't necessarily mean it's more productive. And so we have to look at, again, fundamentally, time and tension. Is this thing helping you challenge your work capacity more? Is it generating tension in the muscle? Is it helping you generate a given amount of tension for more time? And if the answer to those is yes, then yeah, go for it. But a lot of times when we're doing something that isn't generating more tension, and it isn't generating more tension for time, it's just harder for mechanical reasons, then no, it's not going to help you. Things like dead hang pull-ups. You go all the way down, you turn off your muscles, and then you essentially try and get out of the hole, as it were. Yeah, it's harder, but not really doing anything for you. Yeah, get a good range of motion. Yes, and you're going to use a little bit more time because your range of motion is bigger. But if what you're doing really isn't all that much harder on the muscle itself for time and tension, then no, it's not going to help you. So apply the same logic to this exercise here. Is it harder in a productive way? Is it making the muscle work harder? Or is it just harder because of the mechanics of it? And if that's the case, then you're basically making it harder to create the stimulus that you're after. Bruce England, it's good to talk to you, my friend, saying, I can neglect weight-based and other exercises. Okay, sorry, we were talking back and forth. Remember, folks, if you put a hey, Matt, that will get my attention. And I'm just kind of guessing on what people are asking me here. Joseph, it's good to see you. Hey, Matt, when I train my legs and other parts, did it for 3 or 4 minutes and just rest when I need, it would get the same muscle growth as straight sets with rest periods. Very good, interesting example there, Joseph. So as I was discussing in the episode last week, there's lots of ways we can challenge your muscular work capacity. Lots of ways that we can make your muscles effectively burn out and hold tension in time. So there's many options that you have. Don't get this idea that you have to be so dogmatic about how you're approaching things in your training, especially when it comes to muscle growth, because there's so many options. And Joseph, my man, is exactly a good example here. Free Music saying, hey guys, anyone can answer. I'm skinny fat and 5'11", 62 kilograms, but I have fat on my belly. Yep. Thighs and glutes, tiny bit on the chest since I weigh only 62. Okay, so yeah, no problem. This is, a lot of times in our fitness culture, we've got these names, right? Skinny fat, I'm skinny fat. No, it's the same thing as everybody else. You got some fat that you want to get rid of, and we're looking at the body recomposition, which is basically less fat, more muscle. It's no different than anybody else. Okay, it's the same thing. Now, keep in mind too that fat distribution, adiposity, I can't talk here. The distribution of adipose tissue too is also to a degree just how we're built. Right? Some people, they have more of like an even distribution of body fat. throughout this. Some people, they'll just always have more in their belly or their thighs or their glutes or whatever. But nonetheless, it doesn't change anything. The rules are still the same. Build up the muscle underneath. Okay, so you're building up some of the lean tissue, and look to your diet, energy expenditure, typical fat loss protocols, right? And increase the rate of expenditure, decrease the rate of intake, especially if it's luxury calories and stuff. The rules aren't different. This is one of the pet peeves that I developed, especially over the years, when people ask me, okay, but what about strength training if I'm over 40? Or how should I diet if I'm a single female? And I swear, this is just marketing mumbo jumbo, nya, 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 nya. It's like, I'm going to create a program out there. It's like, this is calisthenics programming for white males who are 41 to 42 and a half years old, who live in the northern hemisphere, who live at this altitude, who work exactly 32.6 hours per week. It's all marketing mumbo jumbo. It doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of stuff in our fitness culture that's telling you you're unique, you're different. You've got to have a special diet. You got to have a special workout. You got to do things in a special up. No, it's not true. Everybody fundamentally, we're the same. We all build muscle, lose muscle, build strength, lose body fat and stuff. We're fundamentally the same. We always will be. And the reasons why we do it is the same for every human being that's ever existed and will ever exist, barring any sort of evolutionary thing over the next several 100,000 years. So don't think there's anything special. It's still the same protocols. Body fat levels decrease, increasing expenditure, decreasing intake if you have the room in your diet to do so, and build up the muscle as best you can. There you go. That's the cure for skinny fat is the same for body composition for everything else. Jeff Stockdahl with some fun questions. Best 90s ska bands. Oh, geez. For those who've followed me for a while, I've always been a ska punk fan and stuff. I've always, let's see, Mustard Plug and the Planet Smashers have always been fun. Mighty Mighty Bosstones, even though they're no longer around. The Defiant, haven't checked out their stuff lately though. Dickie Barrett's definitely still rolling, pretty good. But and then there's just simply the Toasters. Growing up in Vermont, we didn't have anything in Vermont, but it was just south of Montreal, east of New York, and north of Boston. So we had kind of this East Coast crosshairs where I was living, where we'd get bands from Montreal, like the Planet Smashers, New York City, like the Toasters, and coming up from Boston, like the Mighty Mighty Bosstones and Big D and the Kids Table. So anything in that general area is what I kind of grew up with. I didn't really get too much into the West Coast scene, not some 41, that's not quite it, but you know what I'm saying. The Save Ferris and Sublime and things like that. That never was really too much in my circle, just because where I was and what I grew up with. We had a club called Club Toast in Burlington, Vermont, and every Thursday night was ska night when I was in college. It was $8 at the door, got you in, and one of those things that was always a good thing. Well, Less Than Jake was there a lot. Spring Heel Jack and stuff. So that was kind of what I grew up with. Continuing along with free music, saying continuation, diet advice. So basically, when it comes to diet, think of it as like a series of tiers of importance. I was addressing this in a workshop that I was a part of this past week. And a lot of times our diet culture encourages us to nitpick things. Like a lot of stuff out there is about inflammation and seed oils and all this sort of thing. For the most part, for most people, this stuff is too trivial to matter or play a very big influence. Most people, if they have trouble with diet, the first thing they need to address is just getting their diet to be steady and stable. Are you consistently getting roughly the same amounts of food on a regular basis? So that's why I think I got these books the other day, Convict Conditioning 2. The thing is not addressed nearly enough. Paul Wade in this, he's like, guys, just start off eating 3 square meals a day, which I know is not what you hear in our fitness culture these days. It's like, what about this fast? What about the carnivore? What about paleo? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Are you getting that? First and foremost, if you're not getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner, stop talking to me because you need to address that first. And okay, sure, some people are like, I don't like to eat breakfast and everything. Fine. Are you getting lunch and dinner then? Are you just getting steady, regular, consistent meals a day? If you don't have that, nothing else you're considering matters. Okay. I don't care if you're organic or paleo or vegan or something. If your diet's all over the place and willy nilly, stop talking to me. Again, it's just not worth addressing. So, can you get consistent, regular meals? And as I talk about in most of my books and stuff, the best place a lot of people can start with making sure that their meals are decent enough is to honor your three P's. Every meal, do you have protein? Do you have plant? And are you managing portion? The three P's: plant, protein, portion. You get those three things dialed in, that's going to pretty much take care of most everything you need for your diet. That's just tweaks and details from that point on. I've recommended that in books for years, and I still get emails from people saying, dude, I got the 3P thing dialed in. I'm done. Like, nutrition and diet for me is checked off. I don't need to think about it anymore. I don't need to worry about it anymore. Because for the most part, that's all people really need. So that's where I would start you off. Do you have consistent meals? And are you getting a good amount of protein? Some plant-based foods, and don't overthink this. It doesn't need to be vegetables like asparagus for breakfast and stuff. A lot of times if I'm making a breakfast sandwich, I'll have a cup of tea. Tea, plant-based, good. There we go. Check that off. And portion, are you getting enough to basically satisfy yourself and not overeat? And if you can do that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that right there sets up a real strong foundation to a good diet. And from there, it's just tweaks and modifications. And so that's where I would recommend you start off, right there. Oh, Bruce is great questions, guys. I love these Ask Me Anything episodes. Matt, are you able to go back to my elliptical bike question? I think that got dropped. I might be able to. I thought you were asking about something else there, Bruce. Post it again here. Going through the feed here. Excuse me, folks. I'm working with some new technology today as well. So if I'm kind of a little haphazard and figuring things out, then that would be why I kind of redid my entire podcasting setup here. So this is the trial run. You should have seen me an hour before I hit live. I was like, whoa, how do I do this? Oh, gosh, I don't know how to set this up. I'm going crazy. Ryan K saying, hey, Matt, a long story short, I was mowing the lawn, tripped on a planter, and landed on my right glute. Ouch, man. I had bad mind muscle connection. Now it's fine, better than ever. Is this normal? It's kind of like these sci-fi movies, where someone gets knocked in the head and suddenly they can read 5 languages or read minds and things like that. Actually, it's not too uncommon. This sort of thing happens sometimes where someone will go through an injury, or they'll have some sort of physical therapy and stuff on a leg. And basically all that happened is, due to the detriment, they had to focus on that area and how they were using the leg or the shoulder or whatever. And they had to kind of build it back up and strengthen it. But if they weren't paying that much attention to how well they were using the muscles or strengthening the muscles or whatever, then they built it back up to where it was and then went beyond. So suddenly the injured leg becomes the strong leg, or the shoulder that was unstable becomes even more stable. So yeah, this isn't too uncommon. It does happen from time to time. Joseph saying, Matt, when I do isometrics before or and after my workout, does it make any difference muscle growth if I do a couple of sets for 20, 30 seconds or just hold for 1 full minute? So you can do it either way. That's one of the great things about isometrics, is it's pretty much idiot proof for programming, because you're just burning out the muscle and you're generating a lot of tension and a lot of time. Here's what I would say though, is you're going to notice that if you hold an isometric long enough, there just comes a point where you're just holding it for the sake of holding it. You're not really being too proactive about generating a good degree of tension in the muscle. So for me, in my experience, I will do an exercise for 20, maybe 30 seconds. If I hold for a minute, I'm just burned out and I'm just holding on for dear life. And the muscle's just kind of a quivering jello-y mass. It's not really doing that much. So pay attention when you're holding on to an isometric. When are you reaching that point where it feels like you're just getting through it, rather than really focusing and concentrating on putting a lot into the actual muscle itself. And that may be 20 or 30 seconds, but depending on the intensity you're using, it may need more time, like 40, 45, or maybe even a minute. But look at that. Darren, why don't we start dips from feet on the floor rather than jumping up to start? Aren't we missing a full range of motion? Well, it kind of depends on your setup there, Darren. Like at the calisthenics gym I train at, we have rings and adjustable dip bars, so we can do it either way. But sometimes, based on your circumstances, the dip bars may be so hard you have to jump up, or you can start on the floor. But I agree. I like doing dips starting with feet on the floor, having the hands roughly about belly height, and I do just a little bit of a jump up, whether I'm doing body weight or weighted, and then I'll pick my legs up. I'm picking up the landing gear, so my knees are slightly in front of me, and then I can get all the way down and all the way up. Keeps my core nice and solid and engaged. Make sure I'm not rocking back and forth. It keeps everything nice and tight. And then when I'm done, I just straighten my legs down, but down I go. So I like to start with feet on the floor as well. Frugal Fitness. It's good to talk to you again. It's always good to see your name. Is your content scripted or do you just wing it? Depends on the content, of course. My books are scripted, obviously, because that's something that I put a lot of time and effort into making sure it's in good order and stuff. But as far as podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff, it's kind of a combination. I'm one of those individuals who I cannot go by a script to save my life. If you give me a script to say on a YouTube video and stuff, it's like herding cats in my brain. I just cannot do it to save my life. So I'll have just a few basic bullet points that I want to make sure I address, and the rest is free form. And that's kind of how I do a lot of things in life in general, is I want structured flexibility. Most of my approaches, my programs and stuff is have the structure to keep you on track and make sure you're going in the right direction, but the flexibility to adapt and be more free form and flexible, so that way you can adapt to your circumstances. So that's how I do a lot of things, I guess. Okay, so Bruce coming back on. Thanks again for posting. Matt, I use an elliptical bike loaded with about 60 pounds of extra weight that I ride for 12 miles up and down nearby overpasses, which I feel is great compound exercises, but I can neglect weight-based and other exercises as a result. Okay, or should I rethink this? Thanks. Bruce, Mountain View, California. Oh, nice area out there, Bruce. Fantastic. So here's the big mistake that a lot of people make is they think that I'm working my legs really hard on the bike or in cardio and stuff, so that's like working my legs, right? And it's like, yeah, it is to a degree, but no, it's not actual like strength training. The program is not the same. Think about it again about time versus tension. So if I'm doing heavy leg work in my strength training workouts, I'm usually working around 6 to 10 repetitions. But when you're on the bike, how many repetitions do you have there? Thousands, potentially, right? So it's not quite the same thing. The other thing, too, is I'm not a fan of weighted cardio to a large degree, mostly because it's just kind of a more difficult, cumbersome way to go about it. As a biker myself, the answer is simple. Yeah, it'll kick your ass for sure. If I load up, I used to ride my bike to the gym when I first moved to Colorado Springs, and it was up a slight hill, and I had a bike lock in quotes, just literally just a heavy construction chain in my backpack. And that definitely was a very heavy weight that I was pulling in. It made it a lot harder. But when it comes to any kind of cardio, just go faster. That's the same thing from a cardiovascular standpoint. You don't need to add weight to make cardio challenging. You just simply go faster if you can. And when it comes, and you were saying on the elliptical, is this an actual bike that moves like an elliptical bike I've seen out there, where it's like a bicycle, but it uses elliptical pedals instead? In that case, I think you mentioned right for about 12 miles up and down. Yeah, 12 miles down nearby overpasses. Find a big hill, my friend. Nothing beats going up against gravity at the end of the day. Go up a steeper hill. So we've got mountains out here in Colorado. I got the Rocky Mountains in my backyard. We've got climbs out here that will literally take 2 to 3 hours to go up. And that will certainly be an adequate workout. One of the favorite ones out here is Lookout Mountain. It takes me about 30 minutes and change to get up. And it will kick my tail every single time. just based on how fast I'm trying to go up. So that's usually what I recommend is try going faster rather than weighted. And no, it's not going to give you the same thing as actual strength training type workouts. Sindar is saying, is it possible to train for strength, hypertrophy, endurance in a single workout? Do you need to focus on these things individually? Are they incompatible with each other in a training scenario? They can be depending on how you program it, but no, you can certainly do it in the same workout. 100%. That's the whole premise behind my grind style calisthenics is how do you program it so you can get all three? And hypertrophy and endurance are kind of the same thing, actually. So yeah, it's certainly possible to do it. It's actually, and if you know how to program it, it's actually easier to make it more effective for one, because when you're kind of trying to go with heavy strength training for the sake of endurance, you're kind of shortchanging the endurance side of things. But if you're going for more of endurance and higher repetition stuff, you're kind of shortchanging the strength. But if you train for the strength aspects of things first, and then you train for the endurance slash hypertrophy after, you'll find that each one complements the other and amplifies the other. So not only are you not compromising each one, and you can get more of them in each workout, but like the programming and grind style calisthenics, it's actually going to make it more effective to get even stronger and more endurance if you know how to do it right. And I go into that a lot with some of my videos and stuff. Check out my grind style calisthenics workouts that I've got to get a feel for that, or just pick up my book, the PDFs. And of course, it's available on Amazon.com. Everything I'm mentioning, folks, down below in the link down, reddeltaproject.com. Jonas Nilsson saying, since 2024 started training Muay Thai. Awesome. Badass, man. Cool. So primarily focus on endurance, intensity, and form. Any advice around how to think / prioritize around implementing resistance training with limited time? So that's a very good question. And it's certainly something that you want to basically just do what you can with what you have. So you're not going to have a lot of time, a lot of energy because you're prioritizing your Muay Thai. And so don't make strength training like this big, huge thing you need to do. So one of my smaller books, Bodyweight Training for Cycling, or just endurance athletes in general, like runners and stuff. The whole point of this is here's some strength exercises that you can do that are not going to take a lot of time and energy because you're going to spend most of your time and energy on the bike anyway. So it's the same thing if you're really putting in a lot of time in the martial arts training, is focus on your basic exercises, push, pull, squat. I have a full ebook on exactly that over at reddeltaproject.com. It's a quick read. It's just $5, but that's where you want to focus is your attention and push, pull, squat, and have your workouts be 10 minutes long. And more importantly, don't make your workouts too much about just kicking your tail. You're already getting your butt kicked in Muay Thai. You don't need more butt kickery in your strength training. And so you want to have your workouts managing your fatigue rather than embracing your fatigue, and instead going after proficiency, strength, stability, those sorts of things are what you want to look at. So treat your conditioning as a skill rather than something that you are trying to just beat yourself up with. Because when we make hard work and exhaustion the goal of our workout, which usually means we don't know what we're doing in our programming, then we're usually compromising everything else that we're doing because we're eating so much time and energy that your martial arts training gets compromised. All right, let's see. So Bruce is following up. Yes, elliptical bike, like similar to gym machine. Fantastic. Those things are cool, man. I've never really used one, but being able to actually get outside on one of those is pretty cool. But when you think about it, that's what an actual bicycle really is. If you take the elliptical motion and just shrink it down so it's a circle, which is not technically an ellipse, but it is a circular motion, then you got a regular exercise bike. Then you got a regular bicycle kind of thing. But you're standing and stuff. It's pretty cool. It's one of these things that you can really modify. But going back to what I was saying earlier, drop the weight off of your back, do actual strength training, and go up a hill. Go up something nice and steep as fast as you can. And that's probably going to be a much more effective way to both building the stamina and endurance you want and the strength. Eva, it's good to see you. Hey, Matt, how are you feeling nowadays, physically and mentally? I'm doing a lot better. Thank you. as some of you have been following me for a while know, I have not been in the best of shape for quite a while. All last year, I was dealing with some serious emotional anxiety issues and stuff. And then this past month, more than a month, almost 2 months, I got hit with one viral thing after the other. It really sucked. I got that norovirus. I can never remember what it's called, but basically, I was like throwing up for 4 straight days. It was pretty nasty, compromising my energy level. And then I got this really bad cough that was persistent, but finally actually feeling halfway decent. I'm hoping to get out for a bike ride tomorrow and testing my lungs just a little bit. My endurance and my ability to push myself has been severely compromised lately to a very high degree. So I'm probably not going to push it too much if I do get out on the bike. And I've still, like, mentally and emotionally, I'm really compromised as far as my ability to push my muscles. Like, I'll go to like 80% of my work capacity in a set of push-ups or something. And I'm like, oh, I just don't have it in me, and I'll just stop. So still fighting some of the emotional barriers and stuff from the illness and stuff that have been holding me back, but every day getting a lot better. Thank you very much for asking, Eva. Very, very good. It's one of those things that I really have been struggling with, but hey, that's the way it works. You know, sometimes life is going to throw you curveballs, my friends, and you're just not going to be able to do what needs to be done, maybe for long periods of time, but that doesn't mean you don't do anything. It means you still do what you can with what you've got. And Andre is coming on to close us off. Hello, what are some posterior chain exercises for hypertrophy strength you could do at home and progress with? Anything with bridges, my friend. So I've got a whole playlist on Red Delta Project's YouTube channel of core and extension work, or extension chain work. So any of that stuff is very effective. Any of the bridge progressions I address in literally almost every book that I've got is really good for all that stuff. A lot of times people will look at calisthenics and think, oh, there's not much for extensions and not much for the back of the body. Totally dead wrong. I didn't build stronger glutes and hamstrings until I got more serious about calisthenics. So that was me particularly, but don't let anybody tell you that it can't be done, because it sure as heck can. And there's lots of ways you can progress it. Like anything with calisthenics, you've got lots of progressive options at your disposal. Lots of ways you can progress things. And the only reason why we think it's limited is because we just don't understand how to effectively progress them. So thank you very much, folks, for coming on in. I do sincerely appreciate all your questions, and I love doing these sorts of things. I do these every several weeks, so there's going to be another one coming up fairly soon. Make sure subscribed, you listen to the podcast if you want to hear the questions that you missed on the reddeltaproject.com or the YouTube channel, or just your local podcast directories. That's something that you can look into as well, because I always post the audio for these a little bit later on. And next week, we'll be back to a regularly scheduled program where I address a topic of the week. If you have anything special that you would like me to address, hit me up over at the Red Delta Project Instagram, slide into my DMs, give me some ideas and advice on what I can address. I've been talking a lot about trying to build muscle with calisthenics lately. Should I address anything new and different? Maybe in answering the question earlier, maybe something about the skinny fat thing, maybe body recomposition, maybe something about dietary stuff. Who knows? My platform is yours, and I want to give you everything that you want from it. So I hope you have a great week. Don't forget to check out all the resources I was mentioning, including all of my coaching that I offer, remote coaching, micro coaching, easier on the schedule and the budget. Everything's over at reddeltaproject.com. Thank you again so much. I will talk to you next week. Till then, be fit and live free.